Good afternoon, everyone. If you logged in to participate in the Bead program webinar today, you are in the right place. We'll start promptly at 1:05. Thank you. Okay, let's start. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to kick off today's session. This is our third webinar on California's Bead sub-grantee selection process. I'm Ali Eshraghi, Program Project Supervisor for the Bead program here at CPUC. Today, we'll focus on Bead program evaluation. I'm pleased to introduce our presenter, Ziggy Rifkin-Fish from CTC Technology and Energy, who will guide us through today's topic. If we can go to the agenda slide. So here's the agenda for today and what we'll be covering. First, we go through the application types and prioritization. The scoring criteria overview is next, and after that, we discuss primary criteria and secondary criteria. Additional prioritization factors coming next, and application ranking as our sixth topic of today's conversation. And finally, we wrap up with what's ahead. Next slide. Thank you. A few quick housekeeping items before we begin. Chat, You can keep an eye on the chat because we will use it to send useful links to you. So through the presentation, we mentioned web page, email address. We share those through chat. In terms of Q&A, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A or email them to beadgrant@cpuc.ca.gov. We will not be able to answer questions during the webinar, but we will be building our Q&A document to address those questions. And as we discussed at the end of this presentation, starting in January, we will have the office hours, which will focus on the questions that you have. Closed caption. English closed captions are available. Select Show Captions on your toolbar or click the small arrow on the Show Captions button for more settings or to see a full transcript. And finally, for the best viewing experience when slides are shared, select side-by-side speaker mode. Now I'll turn it over to Ziggy to go through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Let's dive right into it. Next slide. So the Bead program takes at the applications that come in and sorts them into 3 different categories. First, there are priority broadband projects. Priority broadband is defined as end-to-end fiber optic facilities to each end user premises. Oh, and by the way, I will be referencing initial proposal volume 2 consistently throughout this presentation. So that is the document that California has adopted that is based on NTIA's requirements and guidance, and you consider it the Bible for this program and the selection process and design, and it has the details that we're going over here today, and also the rationale for how these were designed and why. So priority broadband is fiber. Then next is other last mile reliable broadband service. In other words, priority broadband is the fiber version of the larger category of reliable broadband service. This other non-fiber reliable broadband service typically is hybrid fiber coax, licensed fixed wireless, and DSL. And as long as it also needs to be in accordance with performance requirements, which are minimum 100 megabit per second downloads and 20 megabit per second upload speeds. And then finally, the last technology type are so-called alternative technologies. These are low orbit satellite and unlicensed fixed wireless, and any hybrids of those would fall into this category as well. So each category will have slightly different technology-specific questions and slightly differing scoring, just because the technologies are different. And applications will be prioritized based on these 3 groupings of technology types. Next. So as I mentioned, the priority broadband projects, fiber optics is required by NTIA and as adopted in IPv2, has to be prioritized, and that is then followed by the reliable broadband that is so-called qualifying broadband, and then finally alternative technologies. Next. This illustrative graphic comes from NTIA, and illustrates at a high level how this actually works in practice. So as bids come in, we'll first see are there for a specific area, are there any priority bids available? If there are, then we look at the budget. Is it within the budget allocated for that area? If yes, it gets selected. If no, then it'll go down to reliable broadband service. And if there are no priority broadband bids, it again, there'll be the budget will be looked at. There might be some negotiation to see if some proposals can be brought into that or become priority projects, if those can be made available. And if there are none, then it goes into the next category, which is reliable broadband service. And again, check if it's within budget or no. And if there are none and none can be negotiated, then finally the unlicensed fixed wireless or low Earth orbit projects may be selected. And these will be based on, within these different categories, they are always evaluated by score, and we'll get to that later. Next. Next slide. So California's IPv2 initial proposal, volume 2, outlines a competitive, fair, transparent, and open selection process. It is designed within the requirements and guidelines of NTIA. The scoring that was adopted in IPv2 is the primary method used to select projects. And as we mentioned, certain technologies must be prioritized over others, and which means they must be evaluated before other technologies will be viewed. CPUC also has to make sure that as many eligible locations as possible are included at the best available technology type. And that means prioritizing projects that include all eligible locations if they're cost effective over those that propose a lower alternative percentage of coverage of eligible locations. Next. So we're required to, and the IPv2 designed a set of criteria that are used for the formal evaluation of all projects that are submitted. And NTA outlined some specific so-called primary criteria that has to make up at least 75% of all available points. And we'll go over this in a minute. And then some secondary criteria which make up the remainder of the total points available. And there were one such secondary criteria was predetermined, but others were up to the states to customize, and California has done so, and we'll go over those in some more detail. Some of those scoring criteria are specific to priority fiber, and others are specific to reliable broadband applications. And you can find more details on this in IPv2. Next slide. So here's the priority broadband project evaluation criteria. This is for fiber. Affordability makes up the bulk of the points, and I'll go over what all these mean in a few minutes. But this is just to get you a sense of how this is laid out. So affordability is the highest, followed by fair labor practices and the Bead outlay, meaning the request for funding. And that together adds up to 75 points. Then on the secondary criteria, there are 3. Speed to deployment was mandated by NTIA, and then California adopted 2 additional criteria, equity and resilience, and we'll get to that in a second. Next. For other last mile broadband projects, the primary criteria are very, very similar. They have the same amount of points, but the secondary criteria are a little different. We have technical capabilities that give 4 points. Speed to deployment gives only 1. I give 1 point, I should say, how fast you can deploy, and then again equity and resilience. Next. So as I mentioned, affordability gives the most points available. It evaluates the applicant's commitment to provide the most affordable total price to the customer for gigabit symmetric service. In case of priority broadband projects, fiber, and equivalently for other broadband service projects, the most affordable total price for 100 megabit per second and 100 over 20 megabit per second. So you'll get there's a benchmark set at $55 per month, inclusive of all taxes and fees for priority broadband, for gigabit service, and for the 100 over 20 service in other last mile technologies. The benchmark is set as $35. Anything above that, for every additional dollar that you of this price that you would commit to, there's a deduction from the 35 points. So if you can, for priority broadband, if you propose to offer a gigabit symmetric plan at $65, namely $10 above the benchmark, you would get 35 minus 10, meaning 25 points. Next. Fair labor practice, 20 points are available for that, and there are 2 aspects of this. Up to 12 points will be awarded for the quality and contents of labor practices that you would adopt during the and commit to, and up to 8 points will be awarded based on your history of compliance and commitment to future compliance. So and that those 8 points are themselves consists of 5 points for a commitment to future compliance with federal labor laws, and an additional 3 points if you can demonstrate that you have a history of compliance with federal labor practices. Next. Then we have the Bead outlay. This is your commitment to how much you're willing to offer in matching funds. So 25 points, 20 points are available if you are able to offer matching funds at an amount of 65% or more of the total funds. 1 points will be deducted for every 2 percentage points of matching funds. So, for example, if you are offering a 55% match, you'll get 15 points. If you offer 45% match, you'll get 10 points. 35%, 5 points. You can include matching funds from a variety of different sources. If you have some commitment from local sponsoring communities, organizations, then those can be included as well. And matching funds can be in cash or in-kind services. Next. And so scoring on the secondary criteria. Speed to deployment, 5 points if we're talking fiber, 1 point for other technology types. So if you can do it faster, namely within 2 years, you get full points. And if you commit to between 2 and 3, in other words, less than 3, but more than 2, you'll receive 1 point for priority, 0 points for other last mile broadband projects. You get, if it's more than 3, but less than, but within the mandated 4 years, then you get 0 points. Next. So for other last mile projects, non-fiber, 4 points are available for the technical aspects of your proposed solution. So, and we are looking at the speed of the technology. So the speeds of 200 over 50 or faster will receive 2 points. Speeds of less than 200 over 50, but more than the 100 over 20 will receive 1 point. We'll also look at the length of useful life and future scalability, how, and that relates to how easy it is to increase capacity of the network both incrementally and in terms of future upgrades and lifecycle replacement. So if the useful life of your funded infrastructure is less than 5 years, it's 0 point. 5 or more years, 1 point. And likewise, the cost effectiveness of future scalability, if it is deemed effective, you can get cost effective, you can get up to 1 point. Next. So as we mentioned, there were 2 criteria that are unique to California that reflects the feedback and policy priorities of California that were adopted through the public comments and stakeholder input. So 10 points are available for equity. The equity areas are predefined, and you'll receive information and mapping that so you can see where those areas are. 1 point will be awarded for proposing a project area consisting of at least 10% of BSLs, and additional point will be awarded for each additional 10 percentage points in a proposed project that are located in a disadvantaged community or low-income area. And again, these will be defined, and the definition for that equity criterion are, this is not something you have to necessarily memorize, but this is for your interest if you want to know how these were arrived at. The census tract receiving the disadvantaged community are defined in terms of census tract that receive the highest 25% of overall scored in so-called Callan-Byers EnviroScreen 4.0, and there is information where you can find how that was calculated and determined. And the census tract lacking in that score, but receiving the highest 5% cumulative pollution burden scores. Finally, census tract identified in the 2017 DAC designation as disadvantage, and lands under the control of federally recognized tribes. And then those are the disadvantaged community areas. The low income areas are defined as census tracts where the aggregated household incomes are less than 80% of area or state median incomes. And again, there is referencing here, or rather sourcing here, that you can refer to if you're curious about how that was calculated. But these will be made available during the prior to the application stage. So when you complete your application, you'll be able to refer to those areas and see which ones qualify. Resilience is another prioritization factor adopted by California. And that refers to the number of locations to be served by resilient infrastructure. Those are Tier 2 and Tier 3 high fire threat districts. For those locations within Tier 2 and Tier 3, the applicant will have to include reasonable plans to deploy that infrastructure, utilizing appropriate risk mitigation and infrastructure hardening practices. These are these four ones included here are examples, and you may have others or alternative ways of hardening. But some of the ones that are most typical are undergrounding cables and network facilities, utilizing galvanized steel instead of wooden poles, fire-resistant coatings on the infrastructure, and of course, making sure then that more than 72 hours of backup power is available. 1 point will be awarded for proposing a project area consisting of at least 10% of locations meeting the above criteria, and then an additional point will be awarded for every additional 10 percentage point meeting the above criteria. Next. So this is, you've seen this already, but this is a reminder that that applications are prioritized based on technology type. So the first step is a ranking based on technology. First priority, then reliable, then alternative technology. Next. Within those technology types, there's the application proposals are ranked by score. So based on the scoring criteria that we just went over, as example, within priority broadband, you have two applications. One is 72 points, the other is 57 points. You will, of course, we will choose application A, 72 points. And even though there may be an application C that is at 88 point, because it is of a lower ranked technology, it will not be evaluated until after the priority broadband service applications have been reviewed. If Neither of those two priority broadband applications are able to meet the area budget, and we then move into reliable broadband service. Then we will look at application C and D. First, C, is it within budget? If yes, then that will be selected. If no, we'll take a look at application D, which has a lower score. If that is also not able to meet the budget for the area, then we will look at alternative technology applications. Next. So, in summary, we will first rank applications as they come in. We'll rank them first by technology type and then by score within each of these technology types. The categories are priority, fiber, other last mile reliable technologies, cheaply cable licensed fixed wireless, and hybrids thereof, and then finally alternative technologies such as satellite and unlicensed fixed wireless. The primary scoring criteria with the most points include affordability, followed by fair labor practices and minimum bead outlay. And then other criteria is speed to deployment. How quickly are you committed to complete the project? Speed of network and technical capability. How fast, what speeds are you able to commit to? And what's the scalability of the technology that you've adopted? And then finally, equity and resilience. Equity meaning inclusion, your relative proportion of inclusion of low income and or disadvantaged areas for equity, and for resilience, your commitment within certain areas to provide backup power and risk mitigation strategies for infrastructure hardening. Next. And I think I hand over here. Can you, Sam,
Yes.
can you do next slide?
Thanks. Thank you so much, Ziggy, for the great presentation, and thanks to all of you for attending today's webinar. As a reminder, our webinars are open to everyone, and registration links can be found on the Bead events page. In the new year, starting in January, we will continue to hold webinars on Tuesdays from 1 to 2 p.m. and office hours on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. So at the same time, in the afternoon on Tuesdays and Thursdays next year, you can block out your calendars for our Bead outreach activities. The next webinar will be in early January. We will be sending out a notice as soon as it's scheduled. If you have additional questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to beadgrant@cpuc.ca.gov. Thanks again for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day, and have a great 2025.